This question is about crude oil and alkanes. Describe how crude oil is formed. It's worth 3 marks. 1, 2, 3 different bullet points. So what we're going to do first, what's going to happen first of all? Well, if we remember, crude oil is formed, or was formed, under the sea, and it was the remains of, in particular, actually plankton. It's stuff that deposited millions of years ago and was covered and compressed and eventually turned into tiny little pockets of oil. Okay, so be careful, it's not just the we're not just talking about sort of fish here, we're talking about anything that lived in the sea. So dead, dead sea organisms such as plankton. What happened? They were buried. Under mud at the bottom of the sea. At the bottom of the sea. And over millions of years, a long time, over millions of years, were compressed and turned into crude oil. Okay, so dead sea organisms such as plankton, okay, were buried under mud at the bottom of the sea or oceans, and over millions of years were compressed and turned into crude oil. Okay, be careful here not to say that they weren't just plants. Okay, plants formed, plants in particular formed coal, and also don't say they were fossilized, because fossilized means that they would be remaining in fossils. So even they're called fossil fuels, that's because they were formed in a similar way to fossils, not that they are fossils. Okay, so describe how crude oil is separated into fractions by fractional distillations, worth 4 marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the first thing, this is where fractional distillation is where you heat into, so you heat and you get gas, and you condense, back into liquid. Okay, so now in this case, distillation's that. We're not actually going to condense into liquid in this one. So crude oil, first of all, you heat the crude oil. So heat the crude oil. So different fractions have different boiling points. Okay, so different fractions have different boiling points. What happens then is the fractions evaporate. And they rise up, this thing called the fractional distillation chamber. So they rise up through tower or chamber, or they just rise up. Okay, so they rise up through the tower. And what happens is they collect then, they then cool, oops, sorry, let me just, fractions cool and condense at different levels. In the tower. Now this is one of those classic questions where if you know about fractional distillation, you may well remember this diagram. So if you can remember this diagram, doesn't matter how many of these bits you have sticking off here, but you know that there is heat here. Coming in here at the side, you have the crude oil, and then here you have different fractions. Okay, it's hot there, it's colder at the top, and that's what we're getting. The fractions are coming out at different levels there. Okay, so that might help, potentially that might help you sort of think about that diagram. Okay, and what we find is the smallest hydrocarbons are at the top, and the biggest come out at the bottom. And the biggest in particular are things like tar, bitumen tar, and the smallest would be things like methane. Okay.